Good morning. My name is Alex Brower. I am the Information Services Director here at the Mississippi Library Commission. So I am kind of over the library part of our services. So we do have a working library in-house. We are a library for libraries. We exist to be a backup for public libraries. And we have a lot of different projects that we use to do that, including our WPA files. So I'm going to talk about those today, talk about what the Works Progress Administration was, show you where the files live on our website, and then show you kind of what information is in the files. The Works Progress Administration was a work relief program that was developed under the New Deal in 1935. And they had a wide variety of projects that they would use to employ people for public works projects. There was a federal arts project, there was the federal theater project, and the federal writers project is the most applicable to us because that is what led to these local histories that we're going to talk about today. So basically, they employed writers from all over the country, but for us across Mississippi, to go into all of these Mississippi counties, talk to the people who live there, do research, and compile these histories of each county. We have digitized those files. We had them put on microfilm, and then we digitized that microfilm into text searchable PDFs that live on our website. And like I said, they compile these histories by just going through interviewing people who lived in the community. They would look through books about like local flora and fauna. These files cover all sorts of different things. But it was to basically give people jobs when a lot of people were unemployed. There was widespread poverty. And so it led to a lot of really cool stuff. So what is in these WPA files? What information did these people go and collect? So they usually start with information on the founding of the county. They kind of tell you who founded it, where the land came from. They talk about notable homes and people who have lived there. They have a lot of information about the Civil War. They have local flora and fauna. They have famous local trees, depending on the file. And that's not me just being a little silly. They will usually have like, this is the tree that the first car drove by when we first got roads, and things like that. It is lovely. I love weird fun facts like this. The problem is it's not 100% accurate information. So there are some parts where they go through and cite their sources, but they also depend a lot on interviews with locals. And like I think everybody here, people make mistakes. People misremember things. Their interpretation of events, is not always going to be 100% correct. They're using their whole life experience to kind of build their story of what happened. So when you are using it for like factual information or for like a research project, definitely double check another source. Um, just because people are often wrong. So you can use these files for a variety of different like reference interactions. They are great for genealogical research. So, because they talk about notable people who lived in that county, they may tell you a little bit more about their life than just here's where they were born, here's when they were born, here's when they died, here's where they're buried. That doesn't tell you about their life. They tell you about like people who play the flute in their community, people who like make cool art. Um, it tells you more about what their actual life was like than just the biographical details. Um, you can use it for history questions. You can use them in conjunction with our Sanborn map subscription to kind of track the history of notable buildings or homes in your community. You can pair with your local history collections to kind of build community interest or draw people in to, using those local history collections along with these files. It's fun to learn the weird things that have happened in your community, at least to me. Um, Like I said, they have a lot of fun facts about your town or your county. So if you wanted to do like trivia about your town, this is a cool place to look to find those like lesser known facts that will kind of trip people up and get them intrigued. And they will often have information about the smaller towns, the smaller communities that may get kind of overlooked in other sources because they are focusing on the larger like city itself. Um, they have the origins of creek and river names, which is really cool. We had somebody who asked us why this creek in this county that I don't remember the name of the county was called Blind Tiger Creek. And so I went to the WPA files and they had a, like an explanation that there was an illegal bar, like a speakeasy on this creek, and Blind Tiger was the name for speakeasies and illegal bars. So, in conjunction with both of those sources, I was able to kind of explain that there was apparently an illegal bar on that creek, and that's why they called it that, which does not seem very subtle. It seems like a pretty easy way to get your illegal bar discovered almost immediately. Um, but there's cool stuff like that that you can kind of parse out of these files. And again, use caution. Do try to back up your information from another source. They do talk about birds and flora and plants and stuff. So if you're like tracking the presence of like an extinct bird in your community, I would probably check somewhere else in conjunction with the WPA files. But just like stories about somebody's life, is a little bit lower stakes. You can always check it somewhere else, but I wouldn't have this be your sole source if you're like proving a historical fact. So to find the files, I will show you how to do this, but I'm also going to just tell you. So on our website, you are going to expand the MLC services menu, click on online resources, and then the link to the files webpage is at the bottom of the page. Um, and I'm also leaving this up because I wanted to say some of the counties have multiple files. So a couple of them, the files were just so large that we couldn't fit them into one PDF. And they also take some time to download. So if it is 4:59 and you close at 5 and you are trying to answer somebody's question, you might have to come back the next morning. So I have one already downloaded. I'm not going to make y'all watch me wait to pull this up. So I am going to stop sharing my screen. Yes. So let me show you all how to get there. MLC services, online resources, and then we're going to scroll all the way to the bottom of the page, and it's linked here. So if you click on the WPA County files, there we go. It brings up the list, and you can kind of see what I was talking about. Like Adams County has 3 roles, Coahoma County has 2. I have already downloaded the Hinds County file. So let me find where that is. Okay, so this is the Hinds County file. This is the disclaimer that they put at the beginning of every file. It talks about the diversity of sources and fallibility of human memory, and encourages you to consult other sources. So these are the original documents. So a lot of them have like handwriting and notes that they use to kind of put together the final file. So if you see those, that's what it is. Um, and, like I said, most of them start with the formation of the county. So this tells you where they obtained the land, how that happened. They talk about the outfits of the generals who went and like signed the papers. Um, well, another thing I am going to say is that these were written in the 30s and 40s. Um, we speak about people differently now than we did then. So there is some old-fashioned offensive language in these files. So just be aware of that if you are doing genealogy on people who are not white. They are not always spoken about in the kindest terms. So just to put that out there so you are not shocked. So let's see. So this again talks about the formation of the county. I'm going to scroll through. They talk about like early settlements. They talk about how they decided on the county seat. Um, and if you are doing like actual historical research or someone is like writing a paper and using these sources, they do have reference lists. So, when I talk about consulting a second source, um, these, of course, are older. They were current at the time that the papers were written, but you can consult these sources or use them as like a starting point for further research. So you're not completely on your own. They also have information on like rivers and creeks. So if we go down to page 6, sorry, the pages on the files are often different than like the pages up here because as you see, there are 2 pages scanned onto like 1 page in the PDF. So they talk about the major rivers that are in the county. So there's the Pearl River, the Big Black River. They tell you how they got their names. They tell you where they got that information from. Um, I did not know that is how you said Bogachita. I have been saying it wrong the whole time. um, so, like you can see here, they go into a lot of detail in addition to having like the shorter descriptions. Let's see. On page 27, I'm just going to scroll through and show some of like the different sections and things that are in here. I'm not going to read out all the pages or go through the whole entire file. That is something that you are welcome to do on your own. There's a lot of really cool stuff in here. Let's see, page 27 is what I'm looking for. Scroll, scroll, scroll. Oh, the trees. I scrolled over the tree section. So you see, like, they have historic trees that are in here. There is a large, pretty elm that is at the corner of this particular street. They tell you the circumference of the tree. They are all about these trees, y'all. Um, I think this might be the one because I think wherever the Piney Woods School is, they talk about how like the first class of the Piney Woods School was held like underneath this particular oak tree on this log, and like they paint this beautiful word picture of how this school got started, just like in the woods. Um, so that I would probably double check on because that seems a little too convenient and a little too fairy tale to be real. Um, but let's see. So they do have information about like Native American tribes. This is definitely something that I would double check your information on, but they do have information in here um, on them. Let's see. The next thing, page 38 is where we get to the old homes information. Um, Let's see. So this is kind of what those sections are going to look like. So they kind of tell you about the early history of the county. So like the pioneer days. They tell you about the governor's mansion. And it's not just here's where the mansion is, here's how many rooms it has. They talk about like how the staircase rises from the center back hall. Like they talk about it where you can kind of imagine it in your head. They talk about cool art and the furniture and like how they pick the drapes and things like that. Um, so again, if you're like building out a history of this home, you don't always get to know about the draperies or who they bought their furniture from. So you get kind of those cool specific details in the files that you don't always get elsewhere. There's a graceful iron fence that surrounds the grounds. Like you're not going to get that in an architecture, description or on the National Register of Historic Places. Um, so they have more listed here. I'm not going to go through all of them because there are a lot. Um, but I was surprised to see like the Manship House was in here because that was one that I knew about myself. They talk about the balustrades and the grape design that are most unique. Um, let's see. They also have, information about the Civil War. So we're going to scroll down to page 56. So they have like descriptions of people who died in the Vic House Hospital in Vicksburg. They also, if you scroll through this section, they have like descriptions of various battles. They have letters from folks who lived in Mississippi to soldiers that they have transcribed. Um, this very important piano that was relevant to the war somehow. So it's not just details, death dates, and things like that. You know, they kind of build out the lives of the people who were involved. Um, let's see, scroll through this. Not going to read everything out. Um, mm, mm, mm. They also go beyond the Civil War. They have other like military information from the like wars that had happened after the Civil War. I found this particularly cool when I was looking through this earlier. So they had World War veterans who are buried in County cemeteries, organized by name, by the cemetery that they're in, where that cemetery is located, and then how their grave is marked. Um, so this will be really great for a genealogy question. You know, some stuff may have gotten missed. You know, Find a Grave relies on just regular people to go in and put in information. So this is a cool place for you to be able to look to find, you know, if someone's ancestor was buried in Hinds County and you didn't see them in Find a Grave, you didn't see them in Ancestry, this is another resource that you have. Let's see. I think the next thing I wanted to talk about was the Saloon Days section, and that is 163. I'm just going to type it in instead of scrolling. So most of them will have a section like this where they call it Saloon Days. So it's basically like, or they will also call it Outlaw Days. So it's kind of like before there was an organized police force. And they talk a lot about like bars and taverns and trouble that people got into. They'll talk about like notorious criminals. So this one, I thought it was funny because they talk about like this particular hotel where there was a speakeasy underneath the hotel. And then down here at the bottom, they talk about a separate like speakeasy that a lot of people from like the legislature would go and frequent after they did their business for the day. My favorite like little bit of shade that they threw in was that a lot of Mississippi legislation probably got done in this bar and not in the halls of the legislature. Um, but I was able to like use this description of where they found where this bar was located, and I found where it was supposed to be on like Sanborn maps. And so that's like a cool thing that you can do is like connecting that and like showing, having a visual for where this illegal bar was underneath this hotel and stuff like that. So it's really cool. The counties along the Natchez Trace, they will talk about like the bands of brigands who would go and rob people and steal their stuff when they were going down the Natchez Trace, which is always fun to learn about. Um, that might also be fun for genealogy. Maybe one of your ancestors was a ne'er-do-well who gave people guff on the Natchez Trace. I would love that. If I had a criminal ancestor, I would talk about nothing else for the rest of my life. Um, let's see, some other cool stuff on, let's see, 170. They had a list of races and nationalities who lived in the county. And I found particularly cool because they had a list of people who were born in other countries in Jackson. So you know how many people from Switzerland lived in Jackson in the late 30s. They had 3 people from Czechoslovakia. You know, they had 26 people from Russia. And that was just a detail that I had never even considered would have been in here, and I'm not sure where else you would find that. I mean, obviously, you could put that information together from, like, the census, but it's already kind of laid out here. Um, so I just thought that was cool, and so I wanted to show y'all kind of where that was. And not every county is going to have these exact sections laid out in this exact order. we're kind of at the mercy of just like these people who the government told to go and do this. Um, they then, were dependent on the members of the county telling them stuff and the records that the county had been keeping. So if like the courthouse had burned down 10 years ago, they're not going to have a whole lot of stuff to go on. But luckily, the Hinds County files are pretty robust. The last thing I will talk about is page 179. They have a section on folklore. They also have a section on like holidays and special days. So like big events that would happen, how people in the county would celebrate certain holidays. Um, so Children's Day is in most of the files that I have seen, and it doesn't seem to be like a real thing. It just seems to be like something that churches would do, where like the kids did a play. So I just love that it made it the holiday list. And it also talks about like who they interviewed. So this one they talked to Miss Kate Power, and this is her address. Um, and the thought of someone publishing my address in if they interviewed me nowadays like makes me want to crawl in a hole. Um, but it's just how you did things. So you can read about like how they did what they did for Halloween. They had these big quilting events. Sometimes they will talk about like in the farming communities, they would have like log rolls or big days where everybody would get together and like shuck corn all day long. So it's cool to read about how communities, used to come together and do all this stuff. Um, So I think that was most of what I was going to show you just in the files as like examples of what was in there. You can, like I mentioned, do a text search, but these are old files. Um, there are smears, there's handwriting, everything is not completely clear. So sometimes the software will have issues text searching. So it's a good place to start and it will usually get you kind of in the area where you need to go. But don't discount, the file because you don't see it when you do a text search because it may have been smeared enough where the computer didn't see it. But if we search for tree and then do a search, like it'll highlight the word that it's talking about. You can kind of see it up here. Sometimes if tree is in the middle of another word like streets, it will highlight that as well. So you are going to get some stuff that's not quite what you're looking for, but it will take you to, the page with where that word appears. So that is an option. It is a cool thing that you can do. Um, so I'm going to go on. We do have some more information about the file. So if you're interested in learning more about how they came together or, more about other projects and things that the WPA did. So we have a couple of books here in our collection that you are more than welcome to borrow through interlibrary loan. So A Guide to the Magnolia State was a travel guide that was also developed by the WPA. So it kind of goes around the state and tells you like notable restaurants, like hotels you can stay in, things like that. And then this book, The Republic of Detours, talks about how those writers went around and made things like that, like made the travel guide, made these historical or local history documents. So if you're interested in like what that looked like, that book is an option. Um, there's also information in the Mississippi Encyclopedia or the Mississippi Digital Library. The Mississippi Encyclopedia has articles about WPA projects. So something else that I did not know that the WPA did was add a lot of paved runways in small communities so planes could go in and out of those cities. And the digital library has oral histories, and I have linked one here. Um, of people who worked for the WPA and they talk about what they did. And I think this one in particular was someone who went around and like dug ditches for the WPA. If I had to choose, I would much rather be one of the writers who went around and talked to people and not dig ditches. Um, And the Department of Archives and History also has a collection of WPA files and information. So they also have like a little write-up about the files. They have the original files. They have microfilm. And I bring them up because we do not have the files for Sharkey County or Wilkinson County. And I'm not really sure why we don't. But I don't think they have the full original files for either of those counties either, but they do have some information from them that MLC absolutely does not have. So if you are from those counties, they are the place you want to go. So if you are doing reference, doing some research, and you kind of hit a brick wall, you have searched through the files, you've searched through everything you know how to search through, and you are stuck on a question, or you have a patron who like requires a lot of staff time, you are welcome, and they are welcome to use our reference desk. So we are open to all Mississippians. Everybody can call us or email us or Teams us or whatever and ask us questions. Um, we are open 8 to 5 every day, except for state holidays, or every weekday, I should say, except for state holidays. Again, we are here to help with your questions, your research, your patrons' questions. I have included our phone number, our email. You can text us. We also have a chat box on our information services page that is not automated. That is a real person. So if you are trying to be funny and cute, we are going to see it and we will tell each other about it. You're anonymous, so we may not know who you are, but I'm going to hear about the person who said something weird on the chat box. So just, it is a real person. Give us a hot second to look into your question. But we are very contactable and we are here to help. That is all that I have for today. I really appreciate everybody who came this morning and got to talk about weird history stuff with me. Thank you all so much. And we will have more of these in the next year. So come on back.
The video you have just viewed is an MLC production, made possible in part with funding from the Institute of Museum and Library Services. We encourage you to visit our YouTube channel and our LibGuides for further resources and supporting content.